My name is Keith, and from the time I was about 4 years old, I was interested in being a part of the entertainment business. And I've done many things throughout that time, from singing in bands, writing music, hosting television shows, everything involved in the professional wrestling business. And I've written comic books, done a lot of things, and almost all of those things failed in some way or another. But I still kept going. I still wanted to continue to create. And there's just something in me that drives me to create. And I started thinking, well, what is it that drives anyone to create? And that's going to be the point of this podcast. We're going to talk to people from all aspects of the entertainment industry. We're going to find out what made them interested in creating art, and why, when faced with success, when faced with failure, the ups and downs of life and life in the entertainment business, they continue to create. So, and hopefully we'll have some good and interesting conversations along the way that you'll be interested in hearing. So tune in to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Keith. And today my guest is, to be honest, my absolute favorite musician on the planet Earth. So it's a very big deal to me. He is a singer, a songwriter, a producer. And man, I don't even know what else to say. Please welcome John Easdale to the podcast. Thank you so much. From Dramarama, of course.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for having me on the show, man.
Awesome. So when there's someone who comes on the podcast who I have kind of a personal history with, I like to sort of set up my relationship, if you will, with them. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to try not to be too long about it, and then we'll get into the talk. So in 1991 or 92, somewhere around there, I think it was 91, I was very into hard rock. Music was changing a little bit, though, and I was up one night watching Night Flight. And this video came on with a monkey carrying a phone on a pillow. And it was it was Haven't Got a Clue. And I was blown away. Like, there was definitely hard rock elements, but had like a cool Stonesy vibe. And I went out and bought the tape and immediately ordered all the CDs from when I switched over to CDs. I ordered all the CDs from the local record store, and they came in. I bought Hi-Fi Sci-Fi on the day it came out, and I got to see you guys on that tour. You played with Slim Dunlop in Ithaca, New York, at a club called The Haunt. I was sitting at the door drinking with a buddy of mine, and you walked in. And I jumped up and said, "Hi, I'm Keith." And you said, "I'm Johnny." And I said, "I know." And then I had you sign my jacket. I also got to meet Chris that night, and Clem Burke. I sat at the bar with Clem Burke, which was mind-blowing. I mean, I've liked Blondie since I was a kid. And when I went back and got the previous 3 albums, it turned out like I knew anything. I knew 70s TV. I knew It's Still Warm. There were songs that I had heard on the radio. And I was like, I know this song. And they turned out being the singles. So obviously I had heard them. Last Cigarette, I had heard them somewhere in my consciousness. And obviously anything was huge and still continues to get radio play today. But the coolest thing about that show, after the show was over, I saw you again to say goodbye. And the first thing was you apologized for your voice because you said you had a sore throat. And I thought that was I was like, what rock star apologizes to a fan for his voice? And I was like, no, dude, you sounded amazing. And I said, thanks for playing. And you said, thanks for coming, Keith. You remembered my name. After meeting me, going and setting up, playing a whole show, you remembered my name. And that, dude, I don't even know. But I was so excited for the reunion. I was happy that I got to see you guys on your last tour. I didn't know it was going to be your last tour. But I was so excited for the reunion, and I bought Everybody Dies. I ordered the solo record from Egbert off the internet. I tried to get your songs played on WICB, which was the college station in Ithaca. I called them every day and I was like, look, man, John Easdale has this amazing record. Will you please play some of the songs? And some of the DJs were like, I think we have it here in the studio. I'm gonna play it, but it never came on, at least when I called. But I called constantly. I was like, come on, man, you gotta play this record. And then Up to Here a few years back is brilliant. I think it is. I mean, vinyl's always going to have a special place for me because it's the album that really introduced me to you guys like over 30 years ago. But uh, uh Color TV, the album that Up to Here comes off of is just it's a perfect record, man. Like it's so good. Um, so that is my history. I'm sorry that I was gushing so much, but thank you, man. Thank you so much for the music and for being so cool when I met you. And yeah, that's yeah.
Well,
So
thank you, Keith. As Bob Hope used to sing, thanks for the memories. I do appreciate that, and yeah, I'm really proud of Color TV. All too often, bands come back and make a new record, and it's just not what you want it to be. So hopefully that was we accomplished that, something that stands up next to the rest of the body of work. So I appreciate you saying that.
oh, you're welcome, man. I mean, honestly, the reviews on Color TV were so good. Like, I don't think anybody I didn't read anything negative, like to be completely honest. Every review that I saw of the album was so good. I mean, it was so I think you guys did your job. So
A guy, someone wrote, I think it was in the Rolling Stone, maybe it was the Trouser Press book of, a guide to new wave bands or something.
yeah,
He said that we were relegated to the critical acclaim ghetto, which I'll take it. It means a lot when people write nice things about
yeah,
the albums. It's definitely cool. But yeah, no, it's yeah, a point of pride for me that Color TV came out, and
yeah.
and yeah, thank you, man.
Oh, you're welcome, man. So Um, I know I kind of explained the podcast before we came on, but like in emails and things. But what we sort of do in the podcast is we kind of talk about your journey as a creative person. So if you don't mind, let's roll it back a little bit. And what was it that got you interested in making music?
Oh, I think, it started very, very young. I was 4 going on 5 when the Monkees TV show came on the air, and
Sure.
I was a little too young for the Beatles when they first came, invaded America, the whole original English invasion. I was a little too young for that, but the Monkees, I was the perfect age, and it was the perfect TV show. It was like a live action cartoon, and they
Yeah,
they played rock and roll music, and those were the first records I bought, and uh, and I was hooked from there. Honestly, I never expected to, do it professionally. I would say. I mean, it's kind of like, when you're in junior high school and high school, you like to play football, but you never, you're not good enough to get in the NFL or whatever. Um, I just never thought that what we were doing, was ever going to amount to anything other than something that I love to do. So, imagine my surprise 40 years later, 42 years after starting the band, 42 going on 43, that we're still doing it. You and I are talking. We have, you know, all these albums, and we're still playing concerts, and hopefully we'll have another record soon. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like I still have to pinch myself every once in a while because I'm surprised. But yeah, that was, we when we started the band, or even before, I was in a bunch of bands, all through high school and everything. And yeah, I started writing songs just you know, because I did, I don't know. I knew you couldn't get nowhere playing covers in bars or whatever. So I started writing songs. There was a lot of new, we, I had been the guitar player in our band, Mark, who's also listed as Mystery Boy on the early records. I've known him since I was 2 years old, and he lived not next door, but the next house over. So we have a very similar background, a shared history, and grew up listening to all the same music, a lot of it which came from his older brothers and sisters. Uh, and so that was our background. The Monkees, obviously, like I said, first band, but then the Beatles came soon after, and the Stones and the Who and all that 60s stuff, and then Bowie and stuff, the British uh, glitter rock, I guess they called it, and then punk. And so it all kind of put it all together, and you get where I'm coming from as a songwriter. Um, a friend of mine, Chris Carter, who was the bass player in Dramarama when we first started out, he owned a record store with another guy I knew, Tom Mulaney, in Wayne, New Jersey, which is where we all grew up. And I started hanging out there, and they were selling 45s by, independent bands like REM and a band called the Bongos from New Jersey. And so people were making their own records. Um, uh, Punk and new wave was starting to had started to take off. This was like 79, 80. And so we were like, oh, we can do this. We can, we were selling a lot of weird 45s, and some of them really weren't very good. So we were like, we could do this. So that's what we did. We went in the studio. We started going in I guess 1980, and basically we did more recording than we did playing live at first. Played a few clubs, put together a 45 EP, a 7 inch, and then after that we put a 12 inch that was called Comedy, and then those were reviewed in a magazine called Trouser Press that was out at the time, and that made it over to a DJ in France who got the record and then hooked us up with a label in France called New Rose, and they put out our first album, and that made it back across the Atlantic to a guy in California named Rodney Bingenheimer, who's a DJ, and he started playing it on his Sunday night radio show in Los Angeles. And then that radio station started playing it, anything, all, added it to their regular playlist. And so we found out about it, and we came out to California to just on vacation to see what was going on, and we were on the radio and we were playing concerts, and we stayed, and we've been doing it ever since.
Awesome. So I remember reading that Rodney thought you guys were actually a French band, right?
Yeah, there was really nothing on the album that other than the address of the French record label. So yeah, he thought we were French. There was nothing that indicated we were from New Jersey. A friend of a friend of ours told our friend, said, "Hey, Rodney Bingenheimer is playing your record on the radio in Los Angeles," and so we contacted him and told him we were from New Jersey, and yeah, he encouraged us to come out to Los Angeles.
Awesome. Yeah, and Rodney had really good taste in music. Um, like I've got some of his compilations, like the K Rock compilations, and there's pretty good stuff on there, like Gleaming Spears and stuff like that. So and you guys fit in, with that kind of music. So
He was instrumental in discovering a lot of bands. Um, now there were DJs all around the country that were playing the same records, but Rodney being in Los Angeles and having a station like K Rock had a really good, place to to get the credit for being the guy to introduce them, even though there were other DJs playing it. But he gets a lot of credit for introducing the world to, even, going back to Blondie and the Ramones. And actually, I think he was the first guy to play Van Halen. He played them off a cassette back in '76 or something, before they were signed. He played everybody first. He was pioneer. And yeah, if it wasn't for Rodney, I don't know we'd ever gotten out of the garage.
Oh man, that would be a shame. Man, I remember it's crazy to me that you didn't have confidence in your songwriting and stuff because um I had a I worked at a restaurant once. I used to constantly tell people like this guy's lyrics are so clever, but you can relate to him. He makes these pop culture references that like no one makes, and I had a guy who I worked with who thought Neil Diamond was the greatest songwriter of all time. And I love Neil Diamond, I'm not going to lie. But I said, man, you got to check out this tape. And I made him a tape of your stuff. And he came back and, like, the song, I mean, he was hooked on your songwriting. Just like, I feel like anybody who listens to the way you play with lyrics, but at the same time, it's still relatable. Um, I don't know. I feel like you're really, really good at that. Probably better at that than anybody I've ever heard, to be honest. So,
I'm not ashamed of my abilities. I think it's a combination. I mean, I was always, kind of confident in the sense that I could do it. But New York radio was really not
mm,
very, at least commercial radio didn't play a lot of cool music, at least what I thought was cool music. Even bands like the Ramones and Talking Heads and stuff that were from New York and were started out in the CBGBs, they had to go outside of New York to get recognized before, New York radio just didn't play that kind of music. And then there was MTV, and they didn't play that kind of music really either, at least early on when we were starting out. So I just didn't have confidence that we would ever, that anyone else would ever want to put it out, that we'd ever be on a label, or that any radio station would pick it up. That's why we went in the studio and paid for it, and went to the record factory and had them press our own records. It was like, if we wanted this to happen, we had to do it ourselves.
right. And that's kind of the music industry now. Um,
Yeah, it's gone back
Everybody's making their own stuff.
a lot. Well, it's a lot easier now that you have, what you can do with the technology involved in computers and, online distribution. You used to have to go to a studio and pay a lot of money to work in the studio. I mean, to open a studio, to open a recording studio, you had to spend, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just to get the equipment. And now you can do it all on a laptop. So
Yeah.
it's a big difference. And I often say it used to be maybe 100 bands selling 1 million records every year. Now there's 1 million bands selling 100 records every year.
Yeah, yeah. I do remember in kind of the early days of the internet, Ice-T had decided that he was going to put his albums out on his own. And he said that the first time he did it, he sold like a third of what he would have sold with the big machine behind him, but he made more money off that one album than he had all his other albums combined. So when the money's going directly into your pocket, I mean it's easier, I guess, to recoup. So
Yeah, no, well, that's a lot to do with it. And we were very fortunate because we owned outright the first two albums that we put out, one of which included anything, and everything we've done since Hi-Fi Sci-Fi is ours, all completely. Now, being on a major label, you only get a small, tiny percentage of the income, of the revenue. You get a royalty.
yeah,
So yeah, when downloading was big, yeah, all the money went into our pockets, and so yeah, we made a lot more money at that
that's
point
awesome.
off of
That's
those songs,
awesome.
off of those songs than we did off of the songs on say vinyl or Hi-Fi Sci-Fi
Sure,
or one.
sure.
those three albums.
So I want to go back a little bit because you talked about knowing Mark since you were two. Um, so if people who are fans of the band kind of know the story of Jesse somewhat, like the legend of Jesse anyway, he just sort of disappeared after the third album. Went off to uh, India or somewhere to make some honestly really cool records and do a spiritual journey, I guess. But and then Chris, after Hi-Fi Sci-Fi, I mean, he's got the Breakfast with the Beatles and all the radio stuff going on. But you and Mark and Peter have been making music together for 40 years. I mean, that's huge. Like, if you could just talk about that a little bit. I mean, because that's really rare. Like,
Well, we all knew each other. Like I said, I knew Mark since I was an infant. When I learned to dial a phone, I learned his phone number, and that was probably the only phone number I knew until for many years to come. Um, Peter, I met like junior high school, so we were early teens, and we jammed a little bit, all through growing up. We graduated high school all the same year, and yeah, we're just we're just buddies and we're friends, and you know it, we, I mean, I'm still friends with Chris too, and I would still be friends with Jesse if he was still around. Jesse passed away a
yeah,
number of years ago. But but yeah, we found Jesse. He was drumming in a band at a high school battle of the bands. When we first started out, I played the drums in the studio, and
yeah,
when it came time to put together a live band, um, we had our very first drummer, who's on the first 45. Uh, he was another guy we graduated high school with, and then when we went in the studio, I played drums again, and then we found Jesse, like I said, at a high school battle of the bands. He was from the same town we were, and that's the kind of that's how we got together. Like a club, and
yeah,
and we're all still we're all still friends, and we all still get along. We never had auditions, just like people to try out to be in the band, except to fill the drummer's throne, because we had a whole bunch of drummers. We were lucky to get Clem back in the day, and then I was lucky to find Tony Snow, who's been playing with me since Brightside, in '98. So, and Mike also, they're both on Brightside. So, the new guys in the band have been with me for 26, 27 years.
right,
you
right.
know.
So they're only new because the other guys have been there for so long, you know.
But
Um,
it's definitely, I'm proud of the fact that when we go play, uh, Peter and Mark are still there, and Tony and Mark too. We're all good friends. We all get along. That's almost as important. The fact that you can all hang out in a van and
mhm.
for a 7 hour drive, and not want to strangle each other.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I think is really cool about Dramarama, especially seeing them live and seeing you guys live and getting to watch it happen, is like the guitar interplay between Mark and Peter. Because neither one of them is really a rhythm guitarist. Like they both play rhythm and lead, like they switch back and forth, and that is a really cool thing to watch on stage. Um, I just
Yeah, no,
it's unique, you know. Usually there's one guitar player who does one part, but they react off each other. It's really cool to watch.
yeah, and I think that comes around about they've always that's the way it's always been. Marky's a little bit more animated on stage, and
Right.
but Peter is just solid and plays the tastiest leads, I think. And they complement one another. They're both very different kinds of guitar players, but they're also both unique. Not everybody sounds like they don't sound like everybody else, or anybody else. Peter sounds like Peter, and Mark sounds like Mark. Mark don't sound like Peter. Peter don't sound like Mark. But they they know how to play off each other, like you say.
Yeah. And honestly, like another thing that was to me unique for a rock band at the time, like was Chris's bass. Like anything is kind of built around Chris's bass line. And you guys
Mhm.
have other songs that are built around the bass. And that wasn't something that a lot of people were doing in rock music too. So I mean it's it's really cool that you guys had so many unique elements. That you didn't hear. Ain't it the truth? Dude, is built on the bass, or at least to my
Yeah,
ear it is. I don't know if I'm, but
no, there's a lot of songs that start with the bass and then everything comes on top of it. Anything. I've got spies. Ain't it the truth? Prayer also on the
yeah,
it's you start with the bass and the song starts like that, and then everybody else comes in follows it. It's
yeah.
absolutely true.
Something just kind of hit me just now for some weird reason. But one of my other favorite bands is Bang Tango. I have no idea if you know who those guys are. They're a funk metal band. They
Absolutely.
also build a lot of their songs around the bass and have two dueling and working together lead guitar players, at least during their heyday. Uh,
Hmm.
so, I mean, I guess there's like similarities to the music that I like that I didn't really put together until just talking to you about it. But
Yeah,
but
that's
but you could kind of Dramarama and Bang Tango probably have more in common than people would realize at first listen. So that's kind of cool.
cool, man. That's neat.
Yeah,
Thing. Yeah,
yeah,
no, we actually we did a thing once long time ago back in the 80s when Clem was no, probably early 90s, right around the time of the LA riots, so whatever year that
Mhm.
was.
Yeah.
We went down. They were opening up a Hard Rock Cafe in Mexico, in Tijuana, and we all like took the train together, Bang Tango and us, and we got to know one another. So yeah, that's really neat.
That's
Yeah,
really cool, man. What a cool connection. I'm glad I brought it up. That's awesome. Um, so I guess some of my little fanboy questions. I mean, I do want to find out like about the journey in LA and stuff, but um when uh when you guys released What Are We Doing Here? How come the date is wrong?
it was based on a concert we did. We did an Earth Day concert,
Yeah.
uh, and that was one of the inspirations for the song. We did this concert, and everybody was giving speeches, and it was all about being green or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think they called it being green back then, but yeah, it was all about, it was the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, or that was the reason for the concert. But
Mm.
it was on the 21st, and then when the concert was over, there was like tons people just like got up and like left all their trash laying around. I mean, there
Oh
was
man.
of garbage, I was kind of struck by that, and
Yeah.
at the same time, I was also a new father.
Mm.
My first daughter was probably about 1 year old when I wrote that song, and I was thinking about the future, and what are we going to leave for our what are we going to leave for our next generations to come. That's a weird song for me because I don't, as much as I can tell you where the ideas came from. I don't. It's not one like that I really worked hard on, or
Mhm.
that I feel like uh, a sense of ownership of parental ownership. There's other songs that like yeah, like I don't know where that one came from. It's kind of weird. I
Yeah.
we don't play it a lot, and it's one I feel weird about because I'm not a. I even say it in the song. I'm not a protest singer, and I don't want to. I don't write songs that send messages or try to be tell people what to do. That everybody else has to come up with that on their own. I I I
Yeah.
I, I make comments and stuff, but I don't. I'm not a flag waver. I'm not a yeah.
Sure. Well, I think like I mean, there's an alien kind of in the song, you know? So that's how I always pictured it was it's like an alien talking to you, looking at the planet. So that's a really unique way to come at the issues. But yeah, I mean, definitely there isn't a whole lot of political stuff in your guys' music. Maybe up to here. Uh, there's some statements in that, but for the most part, I mean, it's relationships and rock and roll and that's cool, you know. Um,
Yeah. As I get older, I think I write less about, you know, I'm I'm in a much better place now, as far as stability and you know, just
yeah,
everything's cool. So I don't have as much anger and I'm not as unsettled.
sure. Yeah, I've written probably 300 songs and I was super prolific in my 20s and 30s and now it's just like every once in a while something will hit and I'll write it down, but you have to pull songs out of me now where before they used to just kind of flow out because my life was so insane, I guess.
Speaking of words I could have said the exact same words. It's absolutely true. It's a lot more of a, I wouldn't say a struggle, but it's just not as it doesn't come as easily as it once did. It used to
Yeah,
be just like turning on the faucet and the water would pour out. Now it's kind of like the water pressure is way down and just a trickle.
yeah. So, once you guys got out to LA and you decided to stay, I mean, that's huge. Like, um, what sort of influenced that decision? Was it that, you guys started getting gigs and stuff? And what was that like? Like going from New Jersey to LA where there's kind of the big Hollywood machine happening, the
Well, we were in on the East Coast. We really weren't making any big waves. We played a few shows and we were trying, but the scene in New Jersey wasn't what wasn't anything great. And even in New York City, where we could get a couple of gigs, but it just we were beating our heads against the wall, and it wasn't it just wasn't happening. But I think that's pretty typical. And when we came to Los Angeles, we were already on the radio
yeah,
and we could get we played two shows the first week we were out here, and one we were opening up for the Psychedelic Furs at this big old amphitheater, and then another one we sold out the Roxy on the Sunset Boulevard, and we were like, oh, we got to, and we were on the radio every 2 3 hours. It was like almost like a dream. It really was.
yeah,
I couldn't we couldn't believe it. It was like you won the lottery, and it was unbelievable. And still to this day, I'm kind of just incredulous because we didn't
yeah,
have people making it happen. It just happened by itself. It was the songs and the music that made it happen, and not some promotion machine, not some record company spending money to promote it or it wasn't anything other than the music. So it's really neat the way everything happened organically.
yeah. And I remember kind of in the early 2000s, there was sort of a reawareness of the song "Anything Anything." Uh, Rockstar Supernova. I don't know if you were familiar with that show, but okay. Toby from Juke Cartel played the song, and it was the first time I'd ever heard anyone but you guys play the song. But he played it as one of his, audition songs or whatever to try to get in the band. And I was just like, this is anything. And then Lucky Boys Confusion covered you guys, and people started playing the song live, and I felt like and then of course Everybody Dies came out, and it was just
Right.
so I feel like there was a big resurgence on interest in you guys in the early 2000s. Did you notice that too, or
Well, it was weird because I mean, I don't know if it was nostalgia for the '80s or what, but yeah, it was. we were never, in the top 200 albums on Billboard charts or whatever. We were on the modern rock chart a couple of times, but nothing. We never sold millions of records, and we weren't in. But when like the '80s nostalgic started up, and they started playing our records on the oldie stations, whatever. And VH1 did this show called Bands Reunited, which got was the reason we got the band back. We reunited. It wasn't just like we said, oh, we should just go do that. No, it was that show, which was the basis was the concept was they would like just show up and with a camera crew wherever you might be. I was in my garage. The
Yeah.
other guys were at their day jobs, and they would just show up and say, "Hey, you want to get the band back together?" And we all said yes. And that was Jesse came back, Chris came back. Um, it was kind of surreal, just kind of like the same as when we started out in California. It was kind of surreal. It wasn't anything. Wasn't my idea. Wasn't it was somebody. It just happened, and that's how we got back together. And we played a concert in Los Angeles out here, and the reaction was just so overwhelmingly positive. We were like, oh, maybe we should do this. Everybody Dies was originally going to be my second solo album, even though it had Peter on it and it had Mark on it. I had actually recorded some of the songs in New Jersey with Peter, and then I was recording with Mark. I never stopped working with Mark, and so when once that happened, then it was like, okay, this is we're going to call it a drama rum. You know, the, even the bright side is me playing on a lot of the songs. It's just me, although Marky's on there on a couple of tunes. You can tell the difference who's playing lead guitar. um but I play drums, I play bass. That one was way more of a solo album. Everybody Dies was more of a, it was a solo album, but I started thinking more along the terms of a band, not necessarily drama. But it's me writing songs. Like it's just the natural progression. So that's how that happened, and then we've been doing it ever since. In addition to just doing our own thing, we also have gotten on this '80s nostalgia thing where we play concerts, in big arenas and stuff. Uh, Again, we're playing with all the bands that we're playing with all had like top 10 singles. And it's just because, like, I guess it's kind of like a cult underground. Anything just has a life of its
Yeah.
own. And again, there's nobody promoting it. It's not even on a major label. It's just the strength of the song, which is a
Mhm.
beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah. So, talking about that, behind the music, or not behind the music, I'm sorry, reuniting the band.
Hmm.
Um, One of the things that I can get kind of emotional, and one of the things that really struck me about that whole thing was when they were driving Jesse to the reunion, and they asked him why he did it, and he was like, "I love John." Uh, Dude, that was heavy to me as a fan, and yeah, I mean, that was just that to me. That was like the moment in the whole episode, other than you guys actually playing and seeing the crowd get so excited about the songs. So that was really cool, man.
Well, I've always been, the de facto leader of the band because I write the songs, and I tell them what it's supposed to sound like for the most part. It's like, you do this, you do that. But I've never been like a taskmaster, or like someone like never yell at anybody. And I never, it's more like, attraction rather than promotion. It's like,
Sure.
come on, I got this big old van. Come on, everybody, want to go for a ride? I'm driving. I'm the driver, but other than that, it's a team, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the way I treat everybody. And that's the way I treat, like, you told your story at the beginning of the show. that's
Yeah.
where people I meet, you know, I don't believe a lot of show business is smoke and mirrors. I always say it's just a lot of artifice. There's a lot of make believe and a lot of they try to make stars out of people and they're just everybody's just the same, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
For all the same chemical makeup, and the way show business works is they try to build this persona and this image and larger than life and put them up on a pedestal and you know you never really do get to talk to them. They keep them
Right.
tucked away in the back, and you see pictures of them getting out of limousines or walking on red carpets or whatever. But it's not, and it's not because the musicians or the actors or whatever wouldn't be nice if you did get to talk to them, but it's all the handlers, all the machine behind it that prevents you from getting to them because they don't want you to know that they're just like everybody else. They want to build this image of this person who's so special and so magical and unique and different, um
Yeah.
and I think it sometimes it backfires, and then those people become victims of that. Some of the biggest stars are have the saddest stories, whether it's Kurt Cobain or Michael Jackson or Prince or whoever, and you never know how messed up things are. Elvis is a perfect example. You never know how messed up things are until they die, and then all the stories come out. It's like, oh yeah, oh
Yeah.
okay.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like to me, when I met you, you were exactly what I wanted you to be, man. So
I
if
just have,
it's right to have those kind of expectations, you know what I mean? But I just like you had an aura about you, but you were a guy, and it was awesome. So
my mother raised me with good manners, and so that's part of it. But also, yeah, like before a show, I hang out. You see me walking around, and after a show too. I don't try to be, I don't try to hide, and I don't try to be something that I'm not.
yeah,
I'm just everybody else. I came from the audience, and I'm just like everybody else, and that's
yeah,
that. I wish everybody. I guess it wouldn't be the. I don't know. It's funny because sometimes being a big fan of music and whatnot, sometimes I can get you know I buy into the illusion myself, and I'm
sure,
surprised when I find out that's not the reality. But
yeah.
yeah,
I,
it's fun.
I mean, you had Ben Montench and Clem Burke on your albums. That must have been something, in the studio, and then even going on the road with Clem. That must have been as a music fan. I mean, geez,
I went to see Blondie when before after Parallel Lines, but before they were really really big. They went to see
sure,
him in New York, and I went, typical teenage, Debbie Harry fan, but I walked out of that show big Clem Burke fan. He's just such a great drummer, and I was
yeah,
just blown away. He was just he was like Keith Moon, just blew
right,
me. And then, oddly enough, or again, organic moments. We didn't call Clem. Rodney said, "How about Clem?" Because Blondie wasn't working at that time, and Clem was kind of floating around. He was in a couple other bands too, but he was available, and we were like, "Clem Burke," Oh, it was almost like Wayne's World, like we're not worthy. Oh no, we can't play with a guy like that. He's too good, But he was willing, and it worked out really well. And he was with us for a couple of years till the band broke up, And we're still friends too. He and I are still
yeah,
still still hang out. Still talk and happy to see one another. And it's I really. I don't like to leave any damage in my wake. I like be able to look in the rearview mirror and it's all clear and good, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And the drums on Hi-Fi Sci-Fi, like the introduction to Hey Betty and stuff. Oh my Lord. They're so huge, man. Um, and you can, it kind of brought you guys a different sound almost, even though it clearly sounds like Dramarama, but the drums on that record are so big, man.
That was the product of having Clem in the band. And also I
Sure.
think when we were making it, that was the first record we made after the explosion of grunge and all of a sudden hard rock was back in style, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so we were able to play on that, you know, a little bit more. We drew on that a little, I think, a little bit more for that album.
Yeah. Like Bad Seed and Prayer. Um,
Yeah,
big heavy songs, man, for sure.
yeah, got to do a little bit more hard rocking on a couple of those tunes.
Yeah. So when you guys took Slim Dunlop out with you, was that your decision or was that a record company thing or how because for people who don't know, he played in the Replacements,
Yeah,
which the Replacements are a huge influential band. And it was really, really cool to get to see him. They were playing his stuff on the radio back home in Ithaca. I don't know if it was because he was going to be coming with you guys and they were kind of trying to hype the show, but they were definitely playing his stuff. So what? How did the decision get made to bring Slim out with you?
that was one of the few times when we were actually even able to uh, exert any influence on who was playing with us, who we were touring with, and he was with us for that whole tour. Um, a lot of times, well, for us anyway, we were never that big of a band or that big of a deal that we would have, any say in who went with us. And a lot of times it was the agency's choice and whatnot. But I do remember that time being involved in in having Slim with us and say, so yeah, that was a wonderful experience, and it was he was just a totally cool guy.
Yeah, and he had like a really cool, like bluesy, stonesy rock album out at the time. So
That's a
it was
great record.
fun to watch him play it.
Yeah, no, he was
Um,
cool.
yeah.
Very nice
So
man.
So since the beginning, either you and Chris produced all the music. As a young band, like, was there pressure to bring in outside producers? And what made you guys decide to do that on your own? Like, because that's kind of a rare thing, especially back then. There was always producers getting brought in.
Yeah, well, we started it all ourselves in the basement. Actually, in the basement of the record store where that Chris owned. We started recording in the basement there, and then when we went in the studio, we were calling the shots, and so that just like proceeded through our 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 first album, and then I mean, we didn't know how to, work the board or set up the microphone. So we were always at the mercy of an engineer. So all of our albums, once other people were paying for the record,
Mhm.
then they insisted that we had some kind of an engineer who would be like a co-producer. So uh, every album, well, Wonder Land and Vinyl both benefited from having guys who were amazing engineers and also the producers as well. Val Garay did Wonder Land and Don Smith did Vinyl,
Mhm.
and you know uh, we benefited also because those guys were able to um, bring in other people to play on the record. Particularly Don brought made it able for us. We had Jim Keltner play drums on one song, and
Mhm.
uh, Benmont
Yeah.
and Mick Taylor from the Rolling Stones is on that record. We also, because we were on a major label at that point, we we spent more money on that record than we did on the first three albums put together.
Sure.
We probably spent more on our our catering budget, than we've
Man.
spent on the first three albums put together, because we were doing it all ourselves and paying using our own money to pay for those records. So those records weren't very expensive, and vinyl, we spent a lot. We were able to spend a lot more money. Now, having said that, afterwards, you owe the record company all that money, so
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword. But
Yeah.
but but I think particularly vinyl and hi-fi sci-fi, the money is on the record. You can hear it when you listen to it. We spend it wisely to make those records.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, hi-fi sci-fi sounds huge, and vinyl just has like this really cool swagger that maybe wasn't on the other albums as much. There's like a real like a Stonesy vibe through the whole album, I think.
Don Smith, who was the engineer and producer who worked on that album, he had worked in the past with the Stones and with Keith on his solo albums, and also with the Heartbreakers. So he had that connection, and he had that experience, and he was able to bring that into the studio. And he was just a really cool dude. He's since passed away, but yeah, I think that record is one of our best, and certainly one of our
Yeah,
best sound.
yeah, absolutely. So speaking of production, this is another sort of fanboy question, and I feel like the answer is probably going to be no, but there is a band called Greta, and they were a hard rock band. Their vocalist is has kind of a similar vocal style to you, but if you put it in like a more metal context, um, and the album is produced by John Easdale. Their album No Biting. Did you produce that album?
I did.
Oh wow,
I
that's
actually,
awesome.
I actually recorded their demos that they got signed off of.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so cool. I thought for sure you were going to say, "Oh, it's a different John Easdale," because
no,
there's no like you can't. I literally bought it because your name was on it, but then I never could find any information about you being involved. So I just thought maybe it was someone who just happened to have your name. Okay, so continue the story. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no. Again, I'm not the kind of producer who knows how to work the board. I don't know how to set up mics. I'm not an engineer, and so when it came time to make, I recorded the demos with them, and I was the producer of the demos. And when it came time to make the album, again, I was asked to be the producer, but I also co-produced it with a brilliant uh, engineer named Sylvia Massey. She's just
Mhm.
the
Sure.
most talented women in one of the most talented engineers in the business. And she recorded like the first Tool record, I want to say, and she's just amazing. Um, Now, what happened? It just so happens that right around the time that was right I want to say that was right after Hi-Fi Sci-Fi had been recorded,
Mhm.
and uh, I went to New York, and we were recording the Great album. I went to New York for a promotional tour, early promotional tour for Hi-Fi Sci-Fi. It was this springtime. I want to say it was March, and I. Long story short, I got addicted to crack cocaine. Um,
Oof.
and yeah, and it kind of I just kind of went off the deep end between March and June. I just disappeared for the most part. I mean, I was
Right.
I was around, but I wasn't around, and so I wasn't able to do any promotion for the Gret album, or for that matter for the Hi-Fi Sci-Fi album. And actually, when Hi-Fi Sci-Fi came out, I was in the Betty Ford Center in uh,
Mhm.
in Rancho Mirage, California, out by Palm Springs. And luckily, it was a short little run. It didn't last long, but up until that point, I was drinking, smoking weed, and yeah, I would snort coke or whatever sometimes, not all the time, but you know, I had been doing that since I was a teenager. But all of a sudden, I became full on junkie, and I spent a lot of money, and I just really just I messed up really bad and had to go to
Yeah.
rehab. And so that's why I think why I wasn't more a part of the promotion of the Greta record. Now, odd side note, Paul, the singer for Greta, he had been sober for a number of years when we were making the record, and then once they put the record out and he went out on the road, he went off the deep end, and he needed to go to rehab too, to the point where he wasn't able to complete the tour. And for some strange, odd reason, I don't know why the record company decided to do this, but Paul was the singer, he was the songwriter, but they decided to put somebody else in his place. So they finished the tour with a different singer, you
Oh,
know.
that's weird.
It was really weird. And
That's strange, man.
yeah, but no, I love the songs on that Greta record. In fact,
Yeah.
Paul passed away, oh, I don't know how many years ago, 5, 7. I don't know. Time goes fast now, but
Sure. Yeah.
and I was able to get up with the other guys in the band and sing a couple of the songs on that album with them
Awesome.
at his memorial. And
Oh man.
no, that Greta record is really good. It's called No Biting.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I bought it because it had your name on it and couldn't find any information about you being part of it, but I guess that's you just explained that. So and that's I mean, do you mind talking a little bit about mental health and stuff like that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Think I think it's real important, and I wish more people were more forthcoming about it. And well, it's like anything, it has a stigma,
Yeah.
and because some people who do bad things might be struggling with mental health issues, then all of a sudden it becomes a stigma. The same
Yeah.
same with alcoholism or drug addiction. Uh, once you once you admit you have a problem of some sort, then all of a sudden you're a leper. You get sent to the leper colony, and everybody else who has may have those same problems, whether it's mental illness or alcoholism or drug addiction. They can continue to drink and do drugs and just be crazy, and because they've never sought any kind of help, they don't get put in the leper colony. Um, it's a shame, and it's weird because there's a lot of people struggle with mental health and addiction, and sometimes they go hand in hand. But mental health is something that's just far too people are, don't talk about it, and people don't,
Yeah.
and so it gets a really bad reputation, and everybody's like, oh, and it's a lot more common than people realize, I think. And
Yeah.
I've struggled with depression or bipolar, for a long time. I've had, I mean, some of my manic episodes have been, you know, incredibly productive, but
Right.
they're also kind of dangerous. Uh, and the depression is really debilitating. You just don't want to get out of bed. So it's real. I encourage people to seek help and go see a therapist. If it's real serious, talk to physicians, psychiatrists. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed, because this is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a really common thing.
Yeah. I think I remember in the liner notes of Bent Back Tulips, they mentioned there was something mentioned about you checking in somewhere. Um and at the time I was struggling with some stuff. Like I had just gone to college, but I had gotten off drugs and getting off of drugs triggered OCD and anxiety really, really, really bad. And so kind of to see that someone who I really, really admired had similar struggles to me, like really helped, to be completely honest. And I didn't get things fixed until I was in my 30s. And fixed is a relative term, but I ended up, getting institutionalized. And the first time was in a state hospital, which was one of the worst experiences of my life. I mean, I was in there with murderers and stuff. And I had anxiety issues. But the second time, the place where I was getting counseling, it was a private facility, and they actually got me on good meds and got me feeling better than I ever really have. And I've relapsed a couple times. I mean, it happens, but right now I'm 50 and I think I'm in the best place mentally that I've ever been. So it's cool.
That's fantastic, and
Yeah,
I'm very happy for you, because that's seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength, I think, you
yeah,
know.
for sure. Yeah,
But it's yeah, my first time that got me put in a hospital was right around the time after, it was in between Box Office Bomb and Stuck in Wonderland. And we had just gotten back from a tour of France, and we were broke, and we really had nothing going on, But
yeah,
and my soon to be wife was pregnant with our first
mm,
child, and it all just kind of like came crashing down, and I went nuts, and I didn't sleep for like a week, and I wrote
mm,
half the songs on Stuck in Wonderland that week. But I was
yeah,
also, I didn't sleep either.
yeah,
I was just, like I said, manic. And it's scary. And I ended up in the hospital, first in jail for a night or something, then in a hospital.
yeah,
uh it's weird, because then years later, I I started being on medication or whatever. And when I got arrested for another relapse years later, because of my medication, they put me in the psycho ward of the county jail in Los Angeles. Because of my medication, not because I was
right,
really, didn't I don't think I really belonged there, but you know,
sure,
it was
yeah,
it was my prescriptions. So
mm,
it's weird, it's scary, but it's, like I said, it's more a sign of strength to seek help. I really believe.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
just learned, not yesterday, but the day before, a very good friend of mine I used to work with. Um, he had not sought help, and he never did get his act together, and he ended up being homeless. And
mm,
and then he died on October 1st. He was living on
oh,
the streets, but his brother didn't find out until November 12th or whatever. They were his his body's somewhere in the morgue in Los Angeles, and nobody knew who his next of kin was or how to contact them. So they finally tracked down his brother back
wow,
east. And we just found out about it the day before yesterday. And when you hear it, when I think of something like that, and it's sad, and it's scary, and at the same time, I like kind of thank my lucky stars that that could be me real
yeah,
easily, you know,
yeah,
and so I'm really thankful that I was able to, you know, turn it around, and not end up where he ended up. And I'm sure that was definitely a distinct possibility, especially like at that period when the
yeah,
Greta, right before Hi-Fi Sci-Fi came out, and when the Greta record came out. And if you listen to Hi-Fi Sci-Fi, if you see the
oh yeah,
song, some of it is kind of, a preface to what was happening. I didn't realize when I was writing the songs, but I was getting to the end of that trail, and it came out in my songwriting. But when we were recording it, I had no idea that was the case.
yeah,
It's only in hindsight that I could look back and say, "Wow, don't feel like doing drugs." That's an interesting title.
right, right. Or like right on baby baby. I mean,
No,
there's
there's a bunch.
definitely a narrative, man, that goes through it for sure. But I think all your albums kind of have a narrative in a way, which is cool. Like they all sort of have songs that make sense together. Uh, like they almost tell a story the way that they go together. So that's really cool.
That's you know, I've always thought in that, you know, in that term, in terms of trying to create like, you know, like a book of short stories, you know, but
Yeah,
it kind of that thematically can link, you know.
yeah,
Um, color TV in particular, like, you know, because it's the most recent I can think, you know, it starts off, you know, I'm kind of, you know, I'm trying, you know, trying to get clean, and then, you know, by the end of it, I'm settled down, and you know, I'm living happily ever after, you know, and it
yeah.
kind of, that's the journey of that album. So,
It's
you know,
awesome.
it's interesting because the love songs I write now are a lot more, you know, happy love songs than
Sure,
not so
sure.
happy songs.
Yeah, I remember Incredible, and I was like, "This is the happiest song I've ever heard on a Dramarama album." Um, but there's definitely some really optimistic songs on Color TV too, which is it's cool, man. I I feel like the albums are almost like having a conversation with you, even. So it's cool.
There's definitely some autobiographical
Yeah,
thing in all of them, you know, in all of it. I don't, I can't, you can't take me out of it. You know, I'm not that good of a writer that I can just write about other stuff. You know, I mean, some
yeah,
things, you know, poems or you know, pretty words put strung together, but almost all of it has some basis inside me and so in my head.
yeah. Well, I mean, anything, famously is about the dissolution of your first marriage, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
yeah. By the
yeah,
time it was recorded, that marriage was over.
yeah. And that's your biggest song, man. So it's right out there for everybody.
Yeah, what's really funny though is like people will come up to me and say, "That's our song, man. We played that at our wedding," and I'm like, "Oh, that song doesn't have a happy ending. I'm sorry, you
Yeah,
know, but good for you, you know."
right, right, right. So we're a little over an hour, man. So I'm gonna throw a couple more questions out there, and then I'll let you go, dude. I don't want to keep you here all day, but
It's all good, man.
awesome, brother. So how do you guys pick the covers? Because every album has some really cool covers on it. A lot of them introduced me to songs that I had never heard. Um,
Well, well, I'll tell you how that started. At first, we wanted people to notice us, you know, and we were huge fans of Lou Reed and David Bowie, and so if someone did a Bowie song, we'd hear about it, you know. When Bauhaus did Ziggy Stardust, we knew about. That's how we heard Bauhaus, you
yeah,
know, and and so we were like, oh, let's do a Velvet Underground song on our first 45, you know, and then people who like the Velvet Underground, maybe they'll listen, you know, they'll hear about us, you know. It was very calculated in that sense, that we were trying to appeal to people who might not know who John Ron was, but they know the Velvet Underground. Hey, these guys do a Velvet Underground song, let's check them out. And I think that was even, you know, what got us in that magazine I told you about, Trouser Press.
mhm,
uh that was the first thing that got people to pay attention, you know. So at the beginning, that was the idea. Then after that, when we pick songs, we try to pick songs either by bands that maybe somebody didn't know about. Like we did a New York Dolls song when the New York Dolls were had been almost completely forgotten, you know. And tried, and the same thing when the Faces, we did a Faces song, and it was at a point where all the Faces records were out of print. You know, Rod Stewart was a huge star, but people were forgetting about the Faces. This is, you know, the 80s or 90s, the early 90s. Um, so we would try to get people to, you know, hey, look, this is band, the New York Dolls. Hey, the Faces. Hey, you know, and even when we would pick a song like by the Rolling Stones, um, we would try to pick a more obscure song. You know, we wouldn't try to pick the most well known song by any given artist. Try to find a cool song that was a little off the beaten path. You know,
Yeah.
not from the greatest hits album. And even on Color TV, we picked a Bob Dylan song that uh, I think might be on one of those like uh, bootleg series compilations, but not really on it. It's not from any of his albums. Um, yeah, we always try to find something that's a little bit, you know, left of center.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, I Ooh La La is like everywhere now.
I know, but
It was
fine.
in
No,
Daisy Jones and the Six, and
yeah,
like
no, it
yeah,
is. It's a commercial for some uh, for some prescription medicine. It is. It's everywhere, or
yeah,
maybe for insurance. I don't know what it's for, but no, it was forgotten. It was out of print. You couldn't buy the record. Nobody knew. You know, I mean, only people knew it, but it wasn't what it is now. And same with
right,
Velvet. The Velvet Underground was not as mainstream as they are now. When we were in 1986, they were like, you know, oh yeah, that's Lou Reed's old band, but
right,
they weren't as acclaimed or well known as they've become. And certainly we can't take credit for any of that, but it's just weird, you know, in that
yeah,
sense, we were a little ahead of our time. Same with the Dolls. The Dolls were, you know, we were hanging with Sylvain and Arthur in L.A. And Sylvain's actually on the Hi-Fi Sci-Fi, and uh, you know, Sylvain, the New York Dolls were just again, their records were out of print,
yeah,
and you know, people remembered them, but they weren't being celebrated. And now they're well known as, you know, the godfathers of punk rock in a lot of ways.
yeah. When I was a kid, I found a New York Dolls album at a garage sale. I just remember it being really pink. I don't remember like which album it was or really what songs were on it because I was so young, but I liked Van Halen, I liked Foreigner. So I saw these long-haired guys and I was like, let me check this out. And I got it for like 25 cents. And I kept that album for a long time, man, but I honestly I mean, maybe you know which one of their albums was bright pink, but I can't. And it had like a black and white picture of the band on the cover, I think, and it was bright pink. But
Mm-hmm.
that was the one that I picked up at a garage sale as a kid, and then heard you guys play Private World, and somehow Personality Crisis had stuck with me. I knew that song, so
Mm-hmm. It's
um,
great
so
album.
yeah, I
So
mean, but
it's just called the New York Dolls. That's their first.
probably yeah, that's probably what it was. But
At the time, you know, men wearing makeup it was really, you know, outrageous in 1973.
oh
Uh,
sure,
and, and at the same time, those guys weren't, you know, effeminate in any way. You know, they weren't like, you know, limp wristed caricatures. They were tough New York
yeah,
dudes, but
I
they
mean,
were
even in makeup, Buster Poindexter looks like, he could hit you with a right hook. I mean, he just looks like a tough dude.
they were tough guys for sure.
Yeah,
David
yeah,
Johnson, Johnny Thunders, they were great. Um,
yeah.
it's funny because New York Dolls, they had their look. Aerosmith, if you see old pictures of them, they were just, you know, your typical hippie denim
Mhm,
wearing thing. Uh, After the New York Dolls, they shared a management company in like 1973, and
mhm.
not only did Steven Tyler steal David Johansen's wife, but they also stole like their look. All of a sudden, they
Yeah.
got all damned out. They started wearing like leopard skin prints and all these, you know, the look of Aerosmith completely changed like in 73, 74. They stole the whole New York Dolls thing. It's very
That's
strange.
wild, man. And I mean, Hanoi Rocks is direct lineage of New York
Oh,
Dolls, and they influenced. so many LA bands in the 80s as far as look.
Oh
Um,
God, the Poisons of
yeah,
the world and so many of the others. Yeah,
yeah,
even
yeah.
even Guns N' Roses was
Right,
almost there, but there was a lot of bands like that at that point. When we first moved out to LA, the Sunset Strip was just loaded with that kind of stuff.
right, right. And that's kind of what I was into as a kid, but I also grew up on AM radio.
Mm.
So, I mean, I love John Denver. It's like, if something was good, I would gravitate to it regardless. But then, by high school, it's like you kind of listen to what's cool, and that's what was cool. Like guys in leather wearing makeup playing, but I also bands like Junkyard and Bang Tango and bands like that maybe weren't the most popular out of that. I gravitated towards the bands that played bluesy and funky stuff as opposed to just like the party bands that were on TV all the time. Like I never really got into that too much. So, but I did fall into the hard rock teased hair thing for a while. It was just kind of what was there. And honestly, you guys were probably the first band that I really got into that didn't have that image as a teenager. Like seeing that video on Night Flight really like and then there was other stuff happening, Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all that stuff. But like, I kind of credit you guys for getting me out of, and I still love that music. Like, don't get me wrong, but kind of turning me towards a different direction, like Buffalo Tom and bands like that, man. So that was really cool.
Neat.
Yeah, yeah. So, I feel like I have more questions, man, but I've been kind of smiling this whole time. This has been such a cool experience, man. And you guys are out there, you're still playing all the time. What do you guys have coming up? You said there might be new music, which man, that would be amazing. But
I'm hoping to get us into the studio before the end of the year.
awesome.
Uh, I've been working on stuff, and we'll see what happens this election. The outcome of this last election is hopefully it'll come. We'll do some inspiring, and that's as much as
Yeah,
I want about that. But
yeah,
at least about the election. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. And I mean, the last time we started recording, and it was almost 10 years before the record came out. So you never
right,
know.
right, right. Yeah,
It's just it happens the way it happens, and when it's done, it's done. So
for sure. For
I
sure.
mean,
And I mean, it's cool that you're kind of at a point in your career where you can do that. You don't have like a record label pushing you to get stuff out. You can like when you when you feel like you've got something completed and you've got the quality, you can just give it to the world. So that's really cool.
yeah, no, we're very lucky. I think of myself as a very fortunate person for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, it's funny, like I don't want to get into politics either, but the last show that I did, it hasn't been released yet, but I had Rags Morales on. He's a comic book artist. He's
Mhm.
literally my favorite artist. So this has been a really cool couple weeks. Like I got to interview my favorite artist and my favorite musician back to back. So this has been really cool. But he went on like a 20-minute rant about the election, kind of out of nowhere. So people
Mm.
are definitely affected by what happened. I mean, my idea right now is just to kind of keep my head down and power through it, and hope that nothing terrible happens. So
And today I was talking to said, at this point he's just going to be an ostrich man. He's just going to bury his head in the sand. I'm
yep,
concentrating on my family and my pets and
yep,
music and things that make me happy. Because
yeah,
being sad and
yeah,
angry, that it's no fun being sad and angry all the time. So it's
for
going to
sure.
be
Yeah,
good.
last time he was in office, I literally got upset about every single thing that he did. And I'm not going to let him affect my life like that this time. It's just,
My
yeah,
last man episode was triggered by him, and I went nuts. I really
yeah,
did. I went absolutely overboard. Um, didn't end up in a hospital or a prison that time, but I did scare my family, that's for sure. Uh, yeah, no, you can't, and we're all gonna get through it one way or
For
another.
sure. Yeah,
That's
definitely.
about the deal.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I do appreciate it, man.
Oh
And
yeah, of course, man.
when it comes up, send me a link or something so I can put it
Oh, of course.
on the Facebook or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Just
Um,
stay off that too, but I'll still use it for professional reasons. But
yeah,
I'm trying to avoid. I'm avoiding the news and social media and just everything. I'm just gonna, you know,
sure.
try to
Yeah, I
try to.
remember a few. Oh, I'm sorry, man. I keep now I feel like we're having like a regular conversation. I keep on
No,
interrupting, but
not at all.
um, right. But I remember a few years back when I added you, you were really active on Facebook, and it was really cool, like talking back and forth with you about things. And you've kind of petered off a little bit now, and I get it. I don't use Facebook much as I used to either. So, um,
Yeah, especially, yeah. No, I found myself being dragged into arguments
sure.
and things that I really just I had too much negative energy, so I have kind of stepped back. Plus, I think I that whole the Zuckerberg universe is kind of scary.
For
They
sure.
get they get to learn too much about me,
Yeah,
and beyond that, the way I feel about other people's opinions, I gotta believe that other people feel that way about my opinion. So like, why bother?
yeah, for sure. All right, so there's one question that we ask everyone, regardless of what the other questions are during the course of the podcast. So I want to steer it to that real quick. Um, you've obviously had personal turmoil. You moved yourself across the country. You've released a lot of albums. You're kind of at a point where, I mean, you still go out and you play, but you're kind of at a point where you don't have to make music. What is it that makes you or drives you to continue to put stuff out into the world and to create and make art?
Well, to be honest with you, I think, even if we never ever got out of the garage or got out of the basement or whatever, I would still be doing it just for my own satisfaction, and it's in my blood, it's in my soul. Um, Beyond that, though, it's really neat and really just totally gratifying that there's people who actually want to see us play.
Yeah,
The idea that people will reach into their wallets and actually buy a ticket to watch us, play music is incredibly cool. And I think it's easier to win the lottery than to get to do what we've gotten to do, and especially for as long as we've gotten to do it. So as long as people are willing to come see us, I'll get up there and do it. And you know what? I still really do enjoy it. And I like, it makes me happy, and I see that sometimes it makes other people happy to see it, and that's the greatest, gift, in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's just incredibly cool. And once it stops being fun, or once we start not being able to do what we do, at the level that we do it, then it'll be time to call it a day. But I don't think. Luckily, we haven't quite gotten there yet. I'm getting older. Everybody's getting older, but you can look at the Stones and see Mick Jagger. He's 80, right? And
yeah,
he's kicking ass, man. And I went to see Bob Dylan this summer, and he blew me away. Willie Nelson, he was 91, he blew me away. It
yeah.
can be done. So there's hope for the future.
Absolutely, man. All right, John, thank you so much. This this has been one of the coolest experiences of my life, man. Just getting to talk to you. Um, I really
You're making
appreciate
me
it, man.
you're making me blessed. Thank
Yeah,
you
yeah.
so much. It was my pleasure.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, you take care, man. Have a good
Uh,
one. Oh, and I need to close out the podcast. Jeez. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. I want to thank my producer Tyler and Emmy Studios. I've already thanked him a few times, but I want to thank John Easdale for just being a fantastic guest, and yeah, this has been my pleasure. Make sure that you guys tune in next week to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast.